Welcome to today's Wirefunnel webinar. Today you will learn how Expensify improved their sign-up conversion rate and boosted their subscriber base to over 1 million users. Presented by David Barrett of Expensify and Chris Garrett of Wirefunnel Marketing Optimization. Join the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag 1million and the speaker's Twitter names, which you will see at the bottom of each slide. A few housekeeping items before we get started. There's no need to take notes. The presentation deck will be available to you after the webinar. We will email it to you. Questions and comments can be asked in real time by using the general chat pane below, and there will be a QA session at the end. And you'll want to stay to the end of the webinar. We have a free 21-page webinar white paper for you to download and enjoy. Your first presenter today is Chris Garrett. He's the founder and president of Wirefunnel. He developed Wirefunnel's processes, including the lift model and Kaizen. With those models, he has been able to get a conversion rate lift of 10% to 750% for every multi-test client. Chris is also in demand as a speaker globally, and he's the author of the book You Should Test That, which has been getting good reviews on Amazon. You can get a free chapter at youshouldtestthat.com. Chris will now start us off into today's content and show how Expensify reached 1 million subscribers.
Great. Thank you, Gildwin. It's great to be here, and thanks for joining us today on the webinar. And so interestingly, before we get into the content here, I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at the results of the poll that we had here to get you started into the content. So we asked, what challenges do you face in getting conversion optimization started in your organization? And there's a pretty mixed result from the attendees here. The most common is that testing is overly complicated, and that's interesting. Certainly, we see the stats right now in the industry that show that testing is hard for the majority of organizations, where even though it's a priority for a lot of companies, it's actually the #1 priority this year for digital marketers. A lot of digital marketers still aren't able to move the needle on their results. They haven't been able to increase their conversion rate, even with a lot of effort put in. And so we're going to talk today about, we're going to show you a couple examples actually of companies that have been able to do that. I'm going to show you some of the frameworks and the processes that we use here at Wirefunnel and how we get these types of results. And most importantly, we're going to spend a lot of time looking at the story of Expensify and how we were able to work with them to dramatically redesign their homepage and improve their conversion rates there. So 33%, the second most popular answer, we haven't seen great results. And then 27% both each for we have no budget for CRO and there's no staff with CRO experience. So those can be challenges. And fortunately, resistance within the organization is low at 10%. So that's good news. It's been higher in the past when we've done this poll before. So I think organizations are coming around to seeing this as a priority. So let's go right into the content here. I've got one slide about who Wirefunnel is. You know, some of you are new to our webinars, and so we're really happy to have you here. To give you some context for the approach we take and why we're talking about this today, this is all Wirefunnel does. Since 2007, we've been doing conversion optimization for high traffic and medium and low traffic companies, really focused on discovering what really works and creating and understanding frameworks for how to persuade people to act online and how to remove the barriers for action so that we can maximize conversion rates. And really, we're testing a lot with very high traffic companies. You'll see some of the logos here, but the reason I show that is that whether you're in B2B or B2C or e-commerce or lead gen, the frameworks that we've been developing have been tested and tried in all of these industries and all of these target audiences and business goals. And they work across industries, and we're finding more and more similarities across industries, and really deciding or finding the uniquenesses in the target audiences as well. So I'm going to show you some of these frameworks, but let's start off with a quick example before we get into the Expensify story, and I'll introduce David in a moment here. So we're going to take a look at an example that's also was a startup mode. This is Zoomerang. And Zoomerang, if you may be familiar, if you know marketers on the line, they're a freemium subscription model for surveys, where you can take surveys online. But they had a challenge that few subscribers were signing up for the paid versions, and they really needed to dramatically increase their sign-up conversion rate as well. Now, I should mention that since we've been testing with them, we did a bunch of tests on various areas of their website to dramatically redesign their conversion funnel and flow. And since then, they were acquired. So it ended up being a great conclusion for them. They ended up selling the business and getting, I'm sure a premium due to the conversion rate lift that we were able to get together. So the goal here was to increase the signups for both the free and the paid new subscribers to the service. So I'm going to show you a couple examples here just to whet your appetite for what we're going to see today. And here are two variations, and then we're going to get you to test your skills on guessing the conversion rate winner. So these were two different homepages, and what you can see when you look at the previous homepage, this was the original. And of course, we went through the process of analyzing this page from the perspective of the prospect to really identify where are the persuasion opportunities, where are the barriers to conversion, and then created a bunch of hypotheses and a whole bunch of variations to test. These were two of them. And I really want to highlight these two because they're interesting. But you'll notice that both of these are dramatically different than the control page. Because what we had done is we come in to the strategy for this particular website and wanted to decide what are the isolation elements? What are the hypotheses we want to test to really understand their impact? And in this case, we were isolating one aspect. Variation B had the pricing chart right here on the home page. In variation A, you had to click on the button to get to plans and pricing or up in the navigation. But both of these were dramatically different than the control, and that's called a variable cluster test. We changed a whole bunch of variables at once to maximize the effectiveness of the traffic and get one of the swing for the fences types of improvements, as well as an isolation to get insights. So we're going to start by opening up a poll so you can guess which one you think won. And variation A, remember, has the form in the center to sign up for free, 3 easy steps on the left, the value proposition on the right with the plans and pricing down below that. So open up the poll and you can vote on which one you think won. In variation B, the only difference was it had the pricing chart below the sign up field. So the question is, does the pricing chart create anxiety? Does it create distraction? Or does it help more people sign up? So what do you think won? Was it A, without the pricing chart, or B, with the pricing chart on the homepage? Go ahead and put your vote in there. I see the votes coming in fast and furious. And a couple seconds for a couple more of you to vote. Remember, A is no pricing chart, just focused on the form, the minimalist approach, and B has the pricing chart added below. Everything else is the same. Okay, let's close the poll and take a look at the results. All right, so we had 64% voting for B and 36% for A. So this is interesting. Let's take a look at what actually happened. And when we look at the results, it turns out that the sign-up conversion rate was actually identical. So for both variations, there was a 23% lift over the control in signups. Now, of course, there was a little bit of a trick to this. When we ended up looking at the split in the signups between free and paid, it turns out that variation B ended up with a 58% lift in revenue because more people were going straight to paid. Now, there was a competing hypothesis here. Right? One was that including the pricing right on the homepage would create clarity and would get more people into the paid version. But then there was the competing side of, would it create anxiety? There's a free version, so would it make people feel concerned that they're going to be upsold to the pro and wouldn't get the full features? But it turns out there was a lot of people just ready to go into the paid version right away, and that got them a 58% lift in revenue across all of their homepage visitors. So what we're going to talk about today are some unique challenges to startups and fast growth companies. Now, a lot of these things will apply to every other website and business as well, but there's some uniquenesses here. And in the past we've done presentations for enterprise, and we've got a lot of enterprise clients. But the startup challenges are interesting and fun ones to solve as well. So you may resonate with some of these things, and again, you can always feel free to add your comments and questions into the question pane on the right as we go through. But do you have a lean team with diverse responsibilities? Is that something that you recognize in your company where you've got just the right amount of people, or maybe just one too few to do the job, the task that you have on your desk to accomplish, and you've got a lot of responsibilities? That's so common in startups and fast growth companies. You're focused on your core competency. You don't have a lot of fat to burn. You don't have a lot of perhaps extra resources to start diversifying and coming up with new products, and you're really focused on the core competency. You're facing large competitors. A lot of startups are disruptive, and but there's a lot of entrenched competitors that are in place, and you've got to be nimble and try to find an advantage over them. Your competitive environment is changing very fast, right? A lot of startups are perhaps in high tech or biotech or innovative environments. Certainly for us, we find that in conversion optimization, where things are changing every week. You've got to prove the value from every expense that you incur. They've got to be high return. You're not going to go and take out a bunch of newspaper ads and just spraying and praying, taking the spray and pray approach, where you're just going to put stuff out there and hope that something works. Right? You've got to show value, and maybe you've got to answer to investors and VCs, and you've probably got fast growth goals. So these are things that are indicative of the startup fast growth companies, and whatever stage they're at. Some companies and business units within organizations will have these types of profiles when they're in fast growth mode. So the objective from today is to learn how we can take that unique profile and lift your customer acquisition rate, get more customers fast, hit your growth goals, and really effectively take market share and have an unfair competitive advantage against your larger competitors, perhaps, or against your other competitors that you're fighting neck and neck with. So, to that end, we're going to look in detail at the story of Expensify, and I want to introduce David Barrett. Now, David's the founder of Expensify. He's been a developer since the age of 6, and he was a lead engineer at Red Swoosh, which was acquired by Akamai, from which he was dramatically fired. And I'm sure, David, we would all like to hear the story of that if we have time. And then, he, like a lot of people who have worked in large organizations, developed a hatred for expense reports, and haven't we all? And so he created Expensify as a solution to that, something that's easy for people to use, that people will actually love to file their expense reports. Makes it so easy. He loves travel, great wine, so certainly good candidates for filing expenses, and he has a beagle. So I'd like to introduce David, and he'll give some of the situation and background for what Expensify was facing when we started working with him.
Hey, well, thanks for that introduction. I think that pretty much covers everything you need to know about me, especially the beagle part. So yeah, I'd say that basically building on that, I've been programming since a very young age, gone through the startup circuit a couple of times. I think that an exciting moment was basically I got into a little tiff with my employer Akamai about some coverage in Condé Nast sort of portfolio magazine, and this blew up into some big thing. And so, but luckily, right at that time, I was actually working on Expensify anyway. And so I'm like, you know what, screw this, I want to go on and do something else. And so I started Expensify. And so I think really Expensify, I don't know, it came out of a place where there's such a huge problem around expense reports, and there's so much pain and anxiety around the process, and I know I've always hated it my entire life, and so I figured this is a real opportunity to do something about it.
Great.
And so as for the how we sort of got engaged with Wider Funnel and got into the whole world of A/B testing our homepage, I think that we found as we started growing the customer base that the way we acquire customers is just dramatically different than we sort of had expected in the past. Normally, we sort of expected that people that we would just buy AdWords, and then people would come to a landing page and so forth. But we concluded early on that our number one driver of real sort of high quality leads wasn't any sort of paid acquisition campaign. It was really just word of mouth. And so as a result, even though we had incredibly high ranking for all the search engines and so forth, we found that those top keywords brought an insignificant amount of traffic. Nearly all of our qualified traffic came to us direct, so no refer, and from no real insight into who they were or why they were coming to us. They were just showing up blind onto the website. And so as a result, when we went to sort of do A/B testing around our homepage conversion, we recognized that most people who came to the Expensify website already knew pretty much what they wanted. They came with a very clear objective in mind. They just wanted to sign up. And so we tested a wide variety of, or rather, before engaging Wider Funnel, we sort of knew this, but we didn't really have a process in place to kind of do anything with this knowledge. And so that's why we engaged Wider Funnel to help us just really optimize the conversion of the homepage, recognizing that that's where all of our most highly qualified leads are coming from.
Great. Yeah, it was a unique situation, certainly, where you've got a lot of brand awareness, people coming directly to the page, and really needed to understand how to create a relevant experience there, and get remove the barriers, create clarity, and get them into that sign up process. So certainly unique, having essentially a very small marketing website where a lot of the traffic was concentrated on that home page. So, of course, the goal, right, was to increase new member signups. So that's where we started from. So I can go through and look at how we created these variations. David, is there anything else you'd like to add there on the background, or does that cover the majority of it?
I think that covers the majority of it. And I think, as you mentioned, there was a very, very tiny amount of marketing content. And so as a result, really everything was just coming to this one page blind. And so I think it does make for this sort of a lot of the tools that you would normally have at your disposal to sort of segment people into very different sort of landing pages targeted towards their specific needs. Those tools weren't really available to us. And so I think you're right, it made for a very interesting A/B testing challenge because it was such a broad group of people coming to the site that we knew absolutely nothing about.
Right. Very, very little extra data for doing complex segmentation. What we really needed to do was to understand the value proposition and experience that would be presented on that homepage that would maximize signups across the broad spectrum of the audience that was coming in. So this is where it was an interesting challenge for us, because we love testing on homepages because mostly they're terrible. Homepages have really a lot of things going against them. In most organizations, they have a lot of fingers in the pie, right? There's a lot of competing priorities. There are a lot of different departments trying to get their little piece of the homepage real estate, trying to promote their little fiefdom, their little silo, and make sure they get enough voice, because it seems like the more homepage real estate you have, sort of, the more influence you have in the organization in some cases. Now, Expensify wasn't in this situation, thankfully. They're they're a startup mode. The first conversation I had with the company was with David, the CEO and founder, and so it was great to start with that at that point, having real leadership from the top saying this is a priority for the company. Now, we see all kinds of challenges, especially in larger organizations, even startups, where the homepage is just underutilized. Like, look at this example, where the homepage has a rotating carousel, and they're promoting short-term contests that really don't meet the needs of the visitors. The visitors are there, if you think about it, your prospects that arrive on your homepage, on your website, are there to solve a need that they have. They don't care about, sharing their opinion with you or the latest contest. What they want to know is this the right place for me to be right now? Does it have relevance to my needs? Does it have relevance to what I'm thinking in my mind right now? And then there's rotating messages. This is one of the most common tactics that art directors use to try and give themselves more real estate on their homepage by putting new messages, and it just kills conversion, right? It's a terrible tactic, but it just is popular because art directors love it. How many times have you seen a homepage that have tons of messages, distracting design, over-designed, too many competing offers, too many products, too many things to look at? I mean, look at this page. How do you know where to look? Besides the fact that you've got a beautiful woman staring at you, locking eyes, wearing no clothes, how am I supposed to look at the products, and which products should I look at? So, there's all kinds of reasons that this homepage design will just be hurting their conversion rate. And then we've got, of course, one of the common problems with large corporations that we see is the CEO vanity page. We've got Mark Hurd delivering from on high the business strategy from Oracle. But what does that solve for their prospects? How many people that arrive on this page think, you know what, that's great. I would love to have Mark Hurd visit my office because clearly that's available to me. Well, of course not, right? They're looking for a solution. They want some business intelligence. They want a software solution that's going to give them what they need, simplify their IT analytics and whatever else Oracle does for you. So the good news is, in the midst of all of this terrible homepage design, Expensify's didn't suck. It actually was a good homepage. Now that made it even more challenging. That was bad news for us, actually, in that they had done a lot of things right. When we started with them, this was their homepage. So clearly there wasn't a lot of distraction. There wasn't CEO vanity. There wasn't over design. It was a clean design that focused on the top 3 features of the product, right? It's got the clear logo, it's got your features, and it's got an email form right there on the homepage. How much more could you ask for? So this is a big challenge. What do you do when you come up to a page like this that actually looks like it's designed pretty well, right? It's following a lot of best practices. Now, also, this is the most important page they have on their public website. It's the #1 driver of signups. So think about this in your situation. You've got a web page, and it's critical to your business. You're driving a lot of traffic to this page. What do you put on that page? What do you put on your homepage? What do you put on your landing pages, on your product page templates? And this is really going back to 101, but a lot of people on the call, we've noticed, haven't been on our webinars before. So we want to go back to basics here and really talk about what we're talking about here and why this is so important. And then we're going to get into what we did with Expensify. But we've got these critical pages, and they're the gateways to your company, to driving revenue to your business. Think about the Zoomerang example. If they hadn't been finding out how to design that page, they were losing 58% of revenue every single day. So how do you design this? A lot of people are using the HIPPO method, which you're probably, a lot of you are familiar with. The HIPPO is the highest paid person's opinion, and they're the ones in the organization that they clearly have a lot of experience. They have strong opinions, and inevitably opinions converge around their opinions. And then, of course, there's the black turtleneck method, right, where the person in the boardroom presenting your new designs with a black turtleneck, they're the ones that believe that they know what should go live on your website. Well, of course, the better way is the scientific method, and that's what we're talking about today, is redirecting your visitors. So everyone that arrives on the Expensify homepage would be randomly selected to see one of several different variations, and we track conversion rates. Right? And then we can show with statistical significance which ones perform best. And I've talked about this before, and this is where what I strongly believe in. This isn't a new idea. The idea that the advancements that come from to society, all of the things that we enjoy today with lowered infant mortality, increased lifespan, all of the technology we enjoy, the ability to have startups and have webinars communicating across the world with you, and today is all because of science. It's not because of witch doctors and voodoo. It's not because of gut feeling. Someone can't gut feel their way to a PC microprocessor, right? This is involved with science. So and I know that I'm talking to a highly educated crowd here. You guys understand this, and you're here because you're committed to testing and finding out what really works. But how you test is very important. As you saw perhaps in the stats that were rotating at the beginning of the webinar, 200% is an important number. That's the value of a structured testing process. And this was a study by eConsultancy that showed that companies that were doing conversion optimization that had a structured approach to improving their conversion rates were twice as likely to report large increases in sales. So having a structured approach alone is something that will dramatically improve your likelihood of increasing your sales and getting great results from your conversion optimization system. But that's a very difficult thing to put into place. We've been refining a system since 2007, and I can tell you, in the early days, we had a lot of learning to do. One of our early clients was Google, and they wanted to test out whether this strategy of conversion optimization would actually be beneficial for clients. So at the time, they tested us out and wanted us to optimize on landing pages for a lot of their high traffic AdWords advertisers, but they wanted to start small. They gave us a few landing pages to try out, and what they did was looked at the results that we got on testing them, and they found that the companies that we tested with on their landing pages increased their conversion rates, increased their ROI, and then within the next quarter started advertising more on AdWords. So it was a win-win for everyone. It was a win for Google. They got more AdWords revenue. It was a win for the client because they could afford to spend more on AdWords. They were getting better ROI. And of course, it was great for us because Google was paying for us to improve landing pages for advertisers and introducing us to these great companies. But when Google says, "Can you scale?" which is a question they called up and asked us, they actually really mean it. So we said, "Oh yeah, sure, of course we can scale." And then they opened up the faucets, and that's when we really had to refine this process to understand and learn very fast how to deliver fast results for a demanding client. The 800-pound gorilla who's saying, "We need faster test results, we need better test results, and we need this delivered yesterday." And that's really how we developed this process that we have today that I can share with you. Now, I don't have time to get into all of the details on the intricacies of the process that we have, but I want to focus on the area of developing hypotheses in the lift, and then and really show you focused on the example of Expensify and how you can see perhaps some similarities and some ideas that you can create powerful tests that will drive marketing insights as well. And you really revealed something here about their value proposition and something that they can take away and use throughout the organization and throughout the marketing. So let's take a look, first of all, at the framework that we use to develop hypotheses, and that's the LIFT model. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen the LIFT model before. I'm not going to belabor spending too much time on it, but it's important to understand because framework thinking is a critical part of the process for getting great results. With framework thinking, you have a disciplined thought process about why you're testing what you're testing, and actually drill into insights behind it, rather than just testing the latest tips and tricks that you get from the HubSpot blog post that you might have read yesterday or some other blog that's out there. How much of it has actually been tested? And and does it really apply to you and your business? Because every business situation is unique. So what we found is that we can get the best results, and we learned this really early. We can get the best results by putting ourselves in the shoes of the prospects. So think about who your customer is and develop a really detailed persona about what their needs are, what their aspirations are, and why they're there. And then thinking about that person from their perspective, look at the 6 conversion factors. And within these 6 conversion factors, there's actually 27 sub-factors that you can test within. I'm just going to talk high level here about the 6 factors and how you can create hypotheses within them, okay? So the first and the core is the value proposition. And we have some interesting insights here about that today, but the value proposition really is the core of the potential for your conversion rate lift. That is the tension between the perceived costs of taking action in your prospect's mind and the perceived benefits. What's in it for them versus what do they have to lose? What are the risks involved? If that value proposition is a positive equation, if the perceived benefits are greater than the perceived costs, they'll have motivation to take action. If it's negative, they'll bounce right away, okay? And then the other factors support or detract from that value proposition. So we've got the relevance of the presentation, which is the relevance to the source media, the relevance to their needs. Thinking in the case of Expensify, it's the relevance to the brand essence they had in their mind, right? They're coming as direct traffic, direct visitors arriving, and they've got some expectation of what Expensify is going to do. So how do we communicate that that value proposition with relevance to what they're thinking. And then there's clarity of the presentation, which is critical. Clarity has many different sub factors. There's clarity of the eye flow and the imagery and the call to action and the actual copywriting. All of those things are factors. There's anxiety, which detracts from conversion rate, which is any uncertainty the prospect has about taking action. And then distraction, anything that redirects attention from the primary message. We saw a lot of distraction in those examples of the home pages earlier, where there's over-design, there's too many messages, irrelevant imagery, irrelevant messages that aren't speaking to them, but distract from the primary message. And then there's urgency. Why should I act now? Okay. So all of these factors, some of them will be more important to you than others. And others might be more important to other websites. And it really depends on what you need. And that's why just looking for those lists of tips and tricks doesn't solve your problem. What you need to do is to find the solution to the questions and the problems and the barriers that are happening on your website. So let's take a look at the Expensify example. This was the home page, as we saw earlier. And what we needed to do was analyze this page from the perspective of the prospect. And we had some good information about who that prospect was, but really wanted to test and understand how they were going to respond. So I'll show you some of the lift points that we came up with, and then the variations that we tested and the results. All right, so first of all, there's a clarity point here. There was no consolidated headline that summarized the overall value proposition. Now they had, of course, their features here were sort of acting like a headline, but it wasn't giving one consolidated message that resonated with what the visitors were expecting to see. There was no use of color to guide the eye flow. Now they minimized color, reduced the distraction and complexity, but there was an opportunity here to use color to really consolidate the eye flow and focus the attention. Page elements were misaligned. They were using a centered alignment here, which we found to reduce conversions. No mention that credit card signup is, or credit cards are not required for signup, and that's an important anxiety point that could have been mentioned. Important features are actually hidden in this rotating content block, so you can click the arrow and see more features, but they were hidden by default. The call to action areas was given low prominence. Now, of course, it was above the fold, but there was opportunity to increase that prominence as well. There was no CTA headline above the sign-up form, really consolidating what's the benefit of filling in my email right now, right? That's a high anxiety action, putting my email address in there. So how do we make that really easy for them and tie it to the benefit? The form field wasn't autofocus. There's no mention of free in the call to action, and the learn more link right there near the sign-up form was causing some distraction. Okay, so seeing all of these points, and there were lots more that our strategists came up with in their heuristic analysis. The next step is not just to go and change the homepage or to go and hire a designer and redesign the thing. What's important is to take a disciplined approach and the scientific approach to finding out what really works. And so taking these problems, they're actually weaknesses or potential weaknesses, and then converting them into strengths gives us hypotheses to test. So where there's no headline creating a clear eye flow, a hypothesis is that adding a prominent headline will lift the sign-up conversion rate. Now that's something we can test and find out if it really works. So then we go through the list of all of these lift points and convert them into hypotheses and then decide which ones to isolate. And I'm going to show you some interesting isolations here. So let's take a look at 3 variations that were tested against that control and then what happened. So here's variation A, prominent CTA. So you see what we did here is move the features down below the sign-up form, used a color block to focus the eye flow, created a subhead attached to the sign-up, reduced anxiety with the credit card message, and a headline that really resonated with the feeling of Expensify, their brand essence, and the tone that they use in their communications. That also really was fun and reduced anxiety by getting people into believing this is going to be a fun experience as opposed to most expense reporting type of systems. And then variation B, this is where we wanted to emphasize and isolate that value proposition. So, this green box wasn't there, but the green box is identifying the area that was our swap box. So this was simply isolated against the control where we were showing, rather than the features, this one was focusing on benefits. And it gave the three main benefits that we believe were going to move conversion rates. And to really understand, were people here for the features or the benefits? And then variation C was another redesign where we used an image of the software itself, the app within a phone, to create tangibility and clarify that it works on the iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, and Palm. So, of course, this is the moment of truth where you've got your designers laying out your new designs for your homepage. And how do you choose what goes live? Of course, you're not going to use the hippo method or the black turtleneck method. Well, we test it. But here, we want to test your conversion skills a little bit too. So we want to see which one you think won. And I'm going to launch a poll. So you can go ahead and vote on which one you think won. Now, variation A, remember, was had the headline added, consolidated focus on the sign-up form and the features down below. Variation B, isolated benefits below. And variation C used an image of the app within the phone to create tangibility. So which one won? Was it A, the focused and features? Was it B, the focused form and benefits? Or C, with the image? Go ahead and put your vote in there. We'll take a look at what you thought. All right, so we've got most people have voted here. We've got the votes coming in. Okay, we're going to close this down and take a look at what you voted for. This is interesting. So we've got, you know what? Variation C with a 54% win. And it's a beautiful page. That's true. So let's take a look whether that actually won. So variation C had 54% of the vote, B had 30%, and C had 16%. Now, when we actually tested it, it turned out that B won. So if you voted for B, give yourself a raise, because that's a 28% lift in sign-up conversion rate. That's for every 100 visitors, you're now getting 28% more of them signing up every day to become users of Expensify. Now, there's some interesting insight here. It turns out that, when you isolate A versus B, the benefits in this case were actually outperforming the features. Now, we've seen the opposite in some cases as well. We did a test with Iron Mountain and saw that emphasizing the specific features of the service actually worked very well. But for this target audience, it turns out that the benefits tied with that headline created a great resonance and got people through into signing up. And it also turned out that that tangible image actually didn't help. It actually just created distraction and didn't help people. It didn't maximize that sign-up conversion rate when we isolated that. So two new insights that we can now continue to build upon and test. But that wasn't all. Okay, so that's just the starting point. We ran more tests, 3 more actually dramatic test rounds on the homepage, and with lots more opportunities for lift. So it turns out that even after that 28% lift, a lot of people might think that we really achieved a great win, and maybe that's all the conversion rate lift we can get. But it turned out that through those 3 sets of tests, the cumulative conversion rate lift was 47.2% so far. And then during that testing process, we were really thrilled to see that Expensify was able to get past that 1 million user watermark. That was really, partly contributed from the testing. And of course, there's a lot of other factors that have to do with that, with getting to that mark. And it's, it's a thrilling accomplishment for them. And since then, we've been introduced to other people within the investor network, and really thrilled to build that relationship. But it's love popping the champagne corks with a company like that who's really doing something special and growing really fast. And what made it work for them is that they're still an incredibly focused company. They know how to focus on their core competency. And we see this as a hallmark of some of the most successful tech companies, where they know what their best expertise is, and they focus there and bring in experts to help them to supplement the things that they know that they're never going to be the best in the world at, but they can be the best in the world at creating expense reporting software and helping their clients and users get the best results. So, as I said, we continue to test, and as you'll see here, the ending homepage looked very different than even the first round of tests. This was the next, after 3 rounds of testing, it ended up being that this design actually outperformed some of the previous ones, which is a complete redesign. And it looks great, but if they had gone ahead and done this without testing, they wouldn't have known, and we could have ended up with poor results. And this doesn't follow all these so-called best practices that you'll see in the blog posts out there, but it works, and that's the important thing. It maximizes results for Expensify. All right, so we have a few minutes for QAs if there are questions out there. But also, before we get into that, I want to mention that we do have a free website redesign white paper, which, in the spirit of Halloween coming up, we're calling the Black Paper. And we've just released this and written this. It's a 21-page black paper showing how to avoid the common website redesign nightmares. There's 9 horror stories that we hear over and over with people involved in website redesigns. And so we want to help you avoid those. We've got an in-depth white paper that we can share with you. Just email iwant@widerfunnel.com. We'll make sure you get a copy of that. And say hi to our friendly folks here that will send you an email back with that information. And if you do have any other questions specific to your company and your needs, feel free to ask that as well in the email, and we'll be happy to help you out with that if there's something you don't want to necessarily talk about in public here in our QA session. So, oops. So let's open it up, Gildwin, to the QA, the questions here. And if there are questions that you see coming in that we can answer, you can just flag them here now. And
well, we have
yep.
We have a couple of questions coming in. First one is, Bob says, for our new homepage, you state, add a prominent headline to increase signups. Is this not relevant to B2C product site looking to have customers add to cart and checkout? And is a carousel with rotating images still a distraction to conversions on our type of site?
Right. So thanks for that question, Bob. So it sounds like you're a B2C e-commerce website. That's what I understand. And absolutely, that's actually, yes, that's the case. We've tested rotating carousels on many different types of websites and found that almost across the board, they lose in conversion for e-commerce and for lead gen and for subscription sign up, for SaaS models and for e-commerce. There are some cases where they've performed well, but usually there's a very unique situation. And on home pages, I don't think we've seen a rotating carousel, from my memory, actually outperform. And headlines are also very important. And you're right, a lot of e-commerce websites don't use a headline. They just go straight into the product or into an offer or a promotion. And a lot of times that's a missed opportunity. And there's an assumption there that your prospects will immediately understand what's unique about you and why they should buy from you, and why your experience and your products are going to be best for them. The overall value proposition needs to be presented to them, so with clarity. And headlines are some of the best ways of doing that. And they're also great candidates for testing to really find out what's the value proposition positioning that will resonate most with that prospect.
Okay, thank you, Chris. We have another question from Todd. What recommended technologies do you use for A/B testing?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. There are quite a few tools out there now for testing, and we're at Wider Funnel, we're technology agnostic, so we can give recommendations that are unbiased. We don't receive any kickbacks or payment from any of the tool providers. And again, what I said before is that what we found, this is something to look for in general for tool vendors, is to look for tool vendors that understand what their specialization is. Because what we found is the best tools are from the tool vendors who focus on building tools rather than also trying to do the jack of all trades, to have strategy and creative and design and all of that included. And usually, those services groups are underperforming in the marketplace because they tend to be creating strategy and test designs that are designed to maximize the features of the tool that they've created rather than solve the needs of the prospect for the website for their client. And so there's all kinds of tools that we love. And Optimizely is a great tool for getting tests running on websites. It's easy to install. It does take, there's some things like some certain segmentation and different types of advanced tests that take a little bit more elbow grease, but we've developed all kinds of extensions now and ability to run different types of advanced tests. But it's actually a really good tool, really flexible. They've got a good API, and that works well. Visual Website Optimizer is another one that's very popular, especially in Europe. It seems to be really popular, based in India, but the tool is actually very good for easily creating tests. There are other tests or tools that allow for more segmentation as well, like Maximizer and Monetate and High Conversion, and there's a Adobe Analytics. So there are a lot of tools to choose from for A/B testing. Also, standalone landing page hosting tools. If you don't need to test within your website, there are tools like Liveball and Unbounce that will allow you to host your pages straight in the tool and go ahead and test there as well.
And there's another question from Guy. Did you see special results for time of day or specific days? I can imagine some variants outperform others.
Right. So, question about different results from time of day and days. I don't have the data in front of me for this particular test, but in general, there certainly are day of week seasonality and time of day seasonality for some audiences and some target markets and some websites, and so those are things that you want to track for sure and look at. But the way to so there may be some insights there to learn from. But generally, the reason you want to pay attention to that is that to iron out day of week seasonality, you want to run your tests at least over a week and 2 weekends, so that you make sure that you're not getting skewed results based on short-term weekday seasonality impacts and effects. So we'll usually try and avoid that way.
And we have another question from Subrata. Do you have experience in the medical field where patients are looking for specific information on treatment and results? We keep going back and forth on putting up a lot of information on the site to satiate the need to know. And some experiments with minimalist landing pages haven't worked that well yet. Any thoughts for businesses in that scenario? So basically for the medical field where patients are looking for specific information.
Actually, we do. We have 2 clients in the medical field right now that we've been doing landing page testing on, actually 3. It really depends on the scenario that you're talking about, but it sounds like you've hit on an insight that they need more information, and that's certainly the case. I wouldn't say that a minimalist approach works in all cases by any means. In a lot of cases, long copy and providing the content that's rich can persuade people that need that information to take action. And that's one of the hypotheses you can actually test, is how much information is needed. So starting with a long copy page, right, the rich information, and then cutting it down in half and focusing just on the most critical information, and then cut it in half again and whittle your way down to a minimalist page, and testing those against each other can give interesting insights to how much information people need. You can also use things like Crazy Egg, for click heat map tracking and scroll tracking to find out how far people are going down a page. They can give you some information there too. But it's when you've got a lot of information on a page, it becomes much more important how that information is presented. And so the eye flow and the design, and then in particular the copywriting is critical there, because you've got to create a compelling story to keep them engaged in that content and get them through, move them through to that conversion funnel. So the persuasional end of that landing page is very important when you need lots of content to persuade people to act.
Jacob asks, are you confident that A/B testing tools don't pose any risk to SEO?
Well, from all the data we've seen, they don't. And we have a lot of high traffic clients that depend on SEO for their bread and butter. So certainly if that was the case, if we were seeing risk, we'd be the first ones to know. And we are Google authorized consultants. So we work closely with Google to identify and correct any issues that develop. And they've told me, the reps at Google, that they love A/B testing, they support it, and they're certainly don't ever want to penalize websites for running tests, whatever tool they're using. And so I know that that's a priority for them. And in fact, I wrote a blog post about this as well. If you Google it, SEO and CRO at Wider Funnel, it talks about how the principles of SEO and conversion optimization are closely aligned. And if you just follow a few simple tactics for making sure that you are doing the technical things properly, with your 301 redirects after your variations are done and those types of things, you can make sure to preserve all of your SEO value. But it also helps with refreshing content, with creating more relevant content, with reducing your bounce rate, all of the things that may be helpful for your SEO.
Okay, thank you, Chris. We're going to do two last questions. First one is, best practices are dead until you test them, but nevertheless, can you recommend any good books or resources about conversion best practices? And that's a question by Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And you're right. Best practices are dead until you test them. And that's why I called my book, You Should Test That, right? And of course, the title may be a little bit misleading. It's not just a rant about why you need to test. It actually goes into great detail about the process we use and the frameworks for creating hypotheses. In particular, it's been said that the value proposition chapter, I think it's chapter 4 or 5, should be required reading for every marketing course in that book. So, being a biased author of that book, I'd highly recommend it. But also, from a third-party perspective, it's been reviewed very highly by great marketing thought leaders like David Meerman Scott and Roger Dooley, and lots of great people. So if you go to youshouldtestthat.com, you can even download that free chapter and take a look at what other people are saying about it. So that's a great one. I'd also recommend Brainfluence by Roger Dooley. That's a good one with 100 quick tips and tricks to try to test on your website that might apply to you. There's Web Design for ROI by Lance Loveday. It's a great book as well. There's Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. That's a classic. And there's lots more. Actually, there's a blog post that I wrote just recently, FAQs, conversion optimization FAQs on the widerfunnel.com/blog, and it's got a list of books there that you should start with.
Okay, and last question. Do you have any tips on how to A/B test prices?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of interesting things you can learn from price testing. And now the careful thing, and we're doing actually price testing right now with one of our enterprise clients, and you've got to make sure that you're capturing all of the opportunities that are all of the areas that prices exist on the website. So technically it takes some thoroughness in QA. But there are some price inflection points and some unusual pricing experiment results that you can see. The typical economic model says that as you increase price, demand will decrease, right? Your your slope shifts over as. But that's not in practice what happens. Traditional economists assume that price is the only variable, but there are some psychological price points. In some cases, increasing your price can actually increase your sales. There are certain types of products where price can become a stand-in for quality, and it can actually be used as a proxy. And there are other cases where there's actually psychological price points with the sound of pricing. So certain prices that sound smaller, even though they're actually numerically larger. And there are cultural implications for certain price numbers. So there are a lot of things you can test with pricing that can show some interesting results that can actually maximize your revenue. So in those cases with price testing, you want to make sure that you're tracking your results, not just to conversion rate, but to total revenue and margin and profit. So you can find the price points that maximize your overall profit as well. And look at it as the profit per visitor would be the metric you want to track and look at.
Okay, thank you, Chris and David. Thank you to everyone who attended as well. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. And make sure you get your hands on that free black paper by sending an email to iwant@widerfunnel.com. And we'll see you soon on a different webinar or on the website.
Great. Thanks all.